All right, it's Memorial Day 2019, May 27th, I think it is. And my quest for one-armed homestead projects has taken me to the conclusion that it is time to plant the dwarf apple trees that I grafted a couple months ago. Seems hard to believe it was that long ago, but I think it's time to set them out. They look like they're doing good. The grafts seem to have taken, at least on the ones I could see, without getting in there and rooting around. So, time to plant some apple trees.
For years, when I began commercial farming, I stood with the hose in my hand while everything was watered. Not only did I do this for my seedlings, but I would also water by hand everything in the ground in the hoop houses. At that point, I didn't feel like I had enough capital to invest in irrigation. Then, when I finally did, I realized how much time, and by extension, money, I had wasted standing around watering plants. This particular system I'm using here doesn't involve much investment, just the hose, the nozzle, and a couple minutes thought it took to arrive at the design, which admittedly is extremely simple. It's never a good idea to plant fruit trees without having a lot of water on hand. The one thing you want to avoid above all others when planting trees is letting the roots dry. When I'm going to plant trees, I fill a 5-gallon bucket up to a level where the tree roots will be entirely submerged. This is not a good idea if it's going to take you a long time to plant the trees. But if they're only going to be in there for an hour or less, it doesn't hurt the trees at all, and in fact is much better than having them just hanging out in a bucket full of air. Nearly everything I plant on the homestead that's going to be around for a long time has to serve double duty. First, it's going to produce food, and second, I want it to be aesthetically pleasing. Apple trees are definitely no exception to this rule. In this particular case, I'm planting the trees at the ends of the newly constructed rice paddies. I want to be able to access the beds for the rice without bonking into tree limbs. It would be easy at this point in the life of these trees to forget that eventually They're going to be pretty large, and their limbs will spread out, trying to gather as much sun as they can photosynthesize. These are dwarf trees grafted onto bud 9 rootstock. Even still, they're going to be between 10 and 15 feet tall, and, even though I'll prune and train them, they're going to be between 7 and 12 feet wide. I actually want these trees to intermingle their branches, forming a kind of screen on this side of this garden plot. I may even consider espalier. All this is to say that I want to be very careful when I'm planting the trees to make sure I'm trying to orient them so the central leaders and any offshoots will be facing the directions I want. I'm definitely going to have to prune once they get established to accomplish this, but a little bit of forethought now will help me establish them to grow well-developed trees that go in exactly the directions I want them to grow. This is even more of a consideration with these trees because, as you'll recall, I grafted 2 varieties onto the main trunk. In a couple cases, only one variety took. I can fix that in another year. But on the others, I can see that leaves are already forming from the grafted scion. My goal is to pay attention to that and make sure I'm planting in such a way that the trees are spreading east to west, so I can continue to access this grass path from which I'm planting and the rice paddies on the other side. Even though these trees were only grafted a month and a half ago, I'm treating them as though they were grown nursery trees, meaning 1.5 to 2 years old, and 6 feet tall. I'm not planting them, in other words, the same way that we plant trees when Michael and I graft and sell back to Fedco, nursery style. I'm prepping this bed because I know this tree is going to be here for a long time. At least that's the hope. Rather than just opening a hole with a shovel and jamming the roots down into the ground, I dug a hole, and one of the most important steps that I'm taking is to create a berm around that hole that will hold water. If you've never planted a fruit tree, you'll see at the end why this is important. This berm is going to maintain all of the water that I'm going to dump onto the trees, and in the first few months of a tree's life, water maintenance is very important. The more you can do to keep that water around the area that the tree's roots are congregated, the more efficient your watering will be and the better for the tree.